The anomaly began as a pinprick of impossible light between two warring fleets. In the debris field surrounding Vermilion, where 40,000 ships had clashed in the largest engagement the galaxy had ever witnessed, neither Reinhard von Lohengramm nor young Wen-li understood what they were seeing. The rift expanded in silence, a wound in space itself, bleeding colors that physics had no names for. Then it screamed. Reality tore open, and two civilizations' worth of military might vanished into a tunnel of distorted starlight. When the Brunhild emerged on the other side, Reinhard's golden eyes narrowed at the viewport. The stars were wrong. Every constellation, every navigational marker his fleet had used for centuries, gone, replaced by an alien sky dense with unfamiliar systems. Behind his flagship, 13,000 Imperial vessels tumbled through the closing rift, their formations shattered by the transition. Damage reports flooded in, minor hull breaches, navigation systems scrambled, but the fleet was intact. "Status report," Reinhard commanded, his voice cutting through the bridge's confusion like a blade. "Unknown space, Your Excellency," Admiral Mittermeier replied, fingers dancing across holographic displays. Long-range scans detect no registered systems. We're beyond any known territory. Oberstein, the man with the artificial eyes, stepped forward from the shadows. "Curious. The spatial composition appears similar to our universe, yet stellar drift calculations suggest we are not simply displaced in space, but possibly in another dimension entirely." Reinhard's jaw tightened. Dimension. The word tasted like failure. He had been on the verge of decisive victory against the Free Planets Alliance. Young Wen-li's fleet had been cornered at Vermilion. One more push, one final hammer blow, and the war would have ended. Now, that victory had been stolen by a cosmic accident. "What of the enemy?" he asked. "Tracking multiple signatures consistent with Alliance warships," Ruenthal reported from Tactical. "Approximately 9,000 vessels. They emerged 30 million kilometers from our position." Of course Young had survived. The miracle Young, whose luck seemed supernatural. Even dimensional rifts couldn't kill that man. Reinhard allowed himself a thin smile. Very well. If their war had followed them across realities, he would simply finish what he'd started. But first, he needed to understand where they had arrived. "Begin mapping local space," he ordered, "and prepare for..." The proximity alarm shrieked. On the main display, a new contact appeared. It was massive. A dagger-shaped vessel of unfamiliar design, bristling with weapons and easily dwarfing any ship in his fleet. Its hull was a pale gray, marked with symbols he didn't recognize. An empire's insignia, perhaps, but not his empire. "Unknown vessel on approach vector," Mittermeier announced, tension bleeding into his voice. "They're hailing us." "Put it through." The holographic display shifted, revealing a human figure in a gray-green uniform and peaked cap. The man's face was stern, weathered. "Unidentified fleet. This is Captain Kendall Ozzel of the Imperial Star Destroyer Tyrant. You have entered restricted Imperial space. Identify yourselves immediately or be destroyed." Imperial. The word sent a ripple through the bridge. Another empire. Reinhard studied the captain's demeanor. Arrogant authority backed by firepower. He recognized the type. This was a military officer accustomed to absolute obedience, serving a regime that ruled through fear. Not so different from his own, perhaps. But the symbols, the language, the technology, all alien. "I am Reinhard von Lohengramm, Fleet Admiral of the Galactic Empire. he replied, his voice ringing with the confidence of a man who had never bowed to anyone. "We are not invaders, but we will not tolerate threats. We seek information about this region of space and safe passage for our fleet." Azel's expression shifted from suspicion to something approaching disbelief. "Galactic Empire? There is only one Galactic Empire, and it does not recognize your authority. You will stand down and submit to boarding, or we will open fire." Reinhard's eyes flashed. Submit. The word was poison. He had spent his life refusing submission. To nobles who treated him as gutter trash, to politicians who saw soldiers as pawns, to an old order that valued blood over brilliance. He would not submit now, especially not to some petty captain of an empire he'd never heard of. "Oberstein," he said quietly. "Tactical analysis. Their vessel possesses significant firepower," Oberstein replied, his artificial eyes processing data with inhuman speed. "However, our neutron beam cannons and cephalparticle generators should penetrate their hull composition. Their weapons appear to be plasma-based energy projection, less efficient than our technology. Tactical advantage, ours. Mittermeier, ready the forward battle group. Riewenthal, flank positioning. If this captain wants war, we'll educate him on the cost." On the display, Azel's face had hardened. "This is your final warning. Surrender or..." The transmission cut as Reinhard gestured dismissively. "Open fire. Disable their weapons and engines. I want that ship intact for study." The Brunhild's guns spoke. Beams of concentrated energy, technology refined through centuries of warfare, lanced across space. They struck the Star Destroyer's shields, causing them to flare brilliant blue. The alien ship shuddered but held. Return fire came instantly. Green bolts of superheated plasma hammered into Reinhard's forward vessels. 2 destroyers took critical hits, their hulls rupturing in silent explosions. "Their shields are more resilient than predicted," Oberstein noted clinically. "Adjusting firing solutions." Reinhard watched as his fleet adapted in real time, concentrating fire on specific shield sections, exploiting the Star Destroyer's blind spots. This was what his forces did best: learn, adapt, overwhelm. Within minutes, the tyrant's shields collapsed under sustained bombardment. Precise neutron beams disabled its turbo laser batteries and engine clusters. The massive vessel went dark, drifting helplessly as Reinhard's fleet surrounded it. "Cease fire," Reinhard ordered. "Prepare boarding parties. I want their navigation data, star charts, and any intelligence on local powers. And find me Yang Wen-li. If we're trapped in this galaxy, I need to know if he's planning to make allies before I do." As his officers moved to execute his commands, Reinhard stared at the alien stars. He had conquered his own galaxy through brilliance and will. This new galaxy would be no different. But something nagged at him. A detail Oberstein had mentioned during the battle. The enemy captain had referred to a Galactic Empire as if it were absolute, unquestionable. How large was this empire? And what manner of force could hold an entire galaxy in its grip? In the distance, barely visible on long-range sensors, Yang Wen-li's fleet had engaged another group of unfamiliar vessels. The war had followed them through the void. But now, they had new players on the board. Reinhard smiled. Complexity created opportunity, and he had never met a challenge he couldn't master. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. Yang Wen-li had been drinking tea when the universe broke. Now, 40 minutes after emerging into this alien starfield, he was still holding the same cup, cold, forgotten, while his mind worked through impossible calculations. 9,000 ships under his command, all displaced to a region of space that shouldn't exist. No hyperspace lanes matched their databases. No stellar bodies corresponded to Free Planet's Alliance charts. And judging from the debris field his scouts had just detected 30 million kilometers away, Reinhard von Lohengramm had arrived right alongside him. "Of course he did," Yang muttered, setting down the cup. "The universe has a sense of humor." "Admiral?" Lieutenant Frederica Greenhill turned from her station, concern etching her features. "Nothing, Lieutenant. Just commenting on our absurdly consistent bad luck." Yang stood, adjusting his beret, the worn, informal headpiece that drove military protocol officers mad. "What's our tactical situation?" 6 unknown vessels approaching on an intercept course," Julian Mintz reported from sensors. The young man's voice was steady despite the circumstances. Yang had taken him as a ward years ago. Now Julian served as his aide and, more often than Yang liked to admit, his conscience. "Configuration unlike anything in our databases. They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Communications thinks it might be a challenge or warning." "Can we translate?" "Working on it, sir. The linguistic patterns are strange. Syntactically similar to Terran Standard, but the vocabulary is completely foreign." Yang walked to the viewport, hands clasped behind his back. The approaching vessels were sleek, angular, more like atmospheric fighters than space-worthy warships. Yet they clearly operated in vacuum. Their design philosophy differed radically from both Alliance and Imperial aesthetics. No heavy armor plating, minimal visible weapons hardpoints. Either they were incredibly advanced or incredibly foolish. "Any sign of Reinhard's fleet?" he asked. "Long-range sensors detected a large engagement approximately 30 minutes ago," Frederica replied. "Signatures consistent with Imperial energy weapons. They encountered something big, at least 2 kilometers in length. The engagement ended quickly." "He won then?" Yang sighed. Of course, Reinhard had already made contact and demonstrated his usual efficiency. Yang preferred to avoid violence when possible. But his opponent in their decades-long dance of strategy had never hesitated to strike first. It was part of what made Reinhard so dangerous, that absolute confidence in his ability to dominate any situation. The communications console chirped. "Sir, we've established a basic translation matrix. The approaching vessels they're identifying themselves as belonging to a rebel alliance and requesting our intentions." "Rebel alliance?" Yang's eyebrows rose. A resistance movement? That implied an occupying force, which suggested politics, power structures, and his mind was already racing ahead. Potential allies or potential complications. "Open a channel. Let's see if we can avoid shooting at these people." The holographic display materialized, showing a human male in an orange flight suit. He looked young, perhaps early 20s, with an earnestness that reminded Yang of Julian. The pilot's hand rested near what was obviously a weapon trigger, but his posture suggested curiosity rather than hostility. "This is Commander Luke Skywalker of Rogue Squadron," the young man said. "You're not Imperial. Your ship designs don't match anything in our databases. Are you refugees? Defectors?" Yang blinked. The directness was refreshing after years of Alliance political doublespeak. "This is Admiral Yang Wen-li of the Free Planet's Alliance fleet. We're neither refugees nor defectors. We're..." He paused. How did one explain dimensional displacement to strangers? "We're lost. Very lost. and we'd appreciate any information you could provide about local space and political situations. Skywalker's expression shifted from suspicion to something approaching sympathy. You really don't know where you are? This is the Anuat sector, part of Imperial space. The Galactic Empire controls most of the known galaxy. We're part of the rebellion fighting to restore freedom and democracy. Freedom and democracy. The word struck Yang like a physical blow. He'd spent his entire career fighting for those same principles against Reinhard's autocratic empire. Now, displaced across dimensions, he'd stumbled into another galaxy locked in the same fundamental conflict. The irony was almost painful. The Galactic Empire, Yang said carefully. Autocratic regime? Centralized military authority? Suppression of democratic institutions? Yes, Skywalker replied, clearly surprised by Yang's immediate grasp. You fought empires before? You could say that. Yang allowed himself a thin smile. Commander Skywalker, I think we need to talk, but perhaps not over open channels. Would your Rebel Alliance be willing to meet for negotiations? A different voice cut into the transmission, older, more cautious. Admiral Yang, this is General Karlist Riecken of Echo Base. Before we agree to any meeting, we need assurances you're not Imperial agents. Your fleet composition is concerning. 9,000 warships is more firepower than the entire Rebel Alliance possesses. 9,000 ships was concerning? Yang's strategic mind immediately recalibrated. If the rebellion considered his fleet overwhelming, then this conflict was far more asymmetric than the centuries-long war he'd been fighting. The Free Planets Alliance and the Galactic Empire, in his universe, commanded hundreds of thousands of vessels. This Rebel Alliance operated on a completely different scale. General Riecken, I understand your caution, Yang said. But I assure you, we have no interest in supporting authoritarian regimes. My entire career has been spent defending democratic principles against imperial aggression. If you're willing to meet, I'll come with minimal escort. 3 ships maximum. You can choose the location. There was a pause. Yang imagined furious debates happening on the other end of the transmission. Finally, Riecken spoke again. Very well. We'll transmit coordinates for a neutral location. But Admiral, if this is a trick, you should know that the Rebel Alliance has allies you cannot imagine. We have resources beyond conventional military strength. Yang caught the careful emphasis. Resources beyond conventional strength. What did that mean? Superweapons, advanced technology, or something else entirely? He filed the information away for later analysis. Understood, General. We'll meet on your terms. Yang out. The transmission ended. Frederica immediately turned to him, worry clear in her eyes. Sir, meeting an unknown faction with only 3 ships? That's risky, Yang finished. Yes, but necessary. Lieutenant, we need allies in this galaxy, and something tells me these rebels might be the closest thing to familiar ground we'll find. Besides, he glanced at the strategic display showing Reinhard's last known position. If Reinhard makes contact with this Galactic Empire first, we'll need friends. Quickly. Julian stepped closer, lowering his voice. Admiral, what if this empire and Reinhard's empire recognize each other as kindred powers? He could negotiate an alliance before we even understand the local politics. That's exactly what I'm afraid of, Yang admitted. Reinhard sees the galaxy as a chessboard. If he finds pieces he can move against us, he'll use them without hesitation. We need to understand the rules of this new game before he checkmates us with unfamiliar pieces. Orders, sir? Frederica asked. Yang turned back to the viewport, studying the alien stars. Prepare the Hyperion and 2 escort vessels for the meeting. Have intelligence compile everything our sensors have gathered: stellar cartography, radiation signatures, technological analysis of these rebel ships. And Lieutenant Greenhill, start working on a brief for our senior staff. We're going to need to explain to 9,000 confused soldiers why we're potentially allying with strangers, while Reinhard von Lohengramm is probably already making deals with local authoritarians. Yes, sir. As his officers moved to execute his commands, Yang finally retrieved his cold tea and drank it anyway. The familiar bitterness grounded him. They were trapped in an alien galaxy, separated from home by a dimensional barrier he didn't understand. Reinhard was out there, adapting as only he could. And now Yang was about to negotiate with rebels who possessed mysterious resources beyond conventional strength. Just another day in the life of the Miracle Yang. Except this time, his miracles would need to work against a galaxy he didn't understand, led by powers he couldn't predict. While playing a centuries-old game of strategic chess with the one man who'd never lost to anyone but him, young Wen-li sighed and began reviewing the tactical data. Somewhere in these alien stars, there had to be a path to victory, or at least survival. He'd settle for survival. The meeting took place in the shadow of a dying star. Yang had chosen his escort carefully. The Hyperion, his personal flagship, flanked by 2 destroyers. Minimal firepower, maximum diplomatic intent. The Rebel Alliance had selected a deteriorating space station in the Hoth system's outer reaches, far from prying Imperial eyes. As the Hyperion approached, Yang studied the station's construction through his viewport. Ancient patchwork repairs evident across its hull. These rebels weren't just outgunned, they were resource-starved. Approaching docking vector, Julian reported from the helm. Their fighter escort is maintaining distance. No weapons lock. Good. Let's keep it friendly. Yang straightened his uniform, a token gesture toward military formality he rarely bothered with. Frederica had insisted. Something about first impressions with potential allies. The docking procedure was smooth despite the technological incompatibility. Yang's engineers had managed to jury-rig an adapter after analyzing the rebel transmission protocols. As he walked through the airlock, accompanied by Frederica and a small security detail, he noted the subtle differences in atmospheric composition. Slightly higher oxygen content. The gravity felt marginally lighter than standard. The reception chamber was Spartan. Bare metal walls, functional lighting, no decorative elements. General Riecken stood at the center, flanked by Commander Skywalker and a woman Yang immediately recognized as someone accustomed to leadership. She wore white robes, her hair arranged in an elaborate style that seemed ceremonial. Her posture radiated authority, tempered by wariness. Admiral Yang, Riecken said, extending his hand in what Yang recognized as a greeting gesture. Welcome to Echo Base's remote outpost. This is Princess Leia Organa of Alderaan, one of our senior leaders, and Commander Skywalker you've already met. Yang shook hands with each in turn, noting details. Riecken, career military, cautious but pragmatic. Skywalker, young, idealistic, but something else lurking beneath the surface. An intensity that reminded Yang of gifted young officers he'd commanded. And Leia, there was steel beneath that diplomatic exterior. A leader forged by necessity rather than birth, despite the royal title. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Yang said. I understand the risk you're taking. 9,000 unknown warships appearing in your space would make anyone nervous. Nervous is an understatement, Leia replied. her voice carrying both warmth and calculation. But desperation makes strange allies. General Riecken tells me you claim to be fighting your own Galactic Empire. Perhaps you could elaborate. Yang gestured to Frederica, who activated a portable holoprojector. The display materialized between them, showing the Free Planets Alliance and the Galactic Empire locked in their eternal conflict. Star maps spanning hundreds of systems, fleet compositions, political structures. For over a century and a half, my nation has been at war, Yang began. The Free Planets Alliance, a democratic federation, against the Galactic Empire, an autocratic monarchy. We fought thousands of engagements, lost millions of lives. And yesterday, during the Battle of Vermilion, something happened. A spatial anomaly. It pulled both our fleets and our enemies into wherever this is. He watched their reactions carefully. Skywalker's eyes widened at the casualty figures. Raikkon's expression grew grim. But Leia leaned forward, studying the tactical displays with the focus of someone who understood strategic warfare. "You're saying your enemy, this other empire, is here too?" she asked. "Approximately 30 million kilometers from where we emerged," Yang confirmed. 13,000 warships under the command of Reinhard von Lohengramm. He's... Yang paused, searching for adequate description. "He's the most brilliant military commander I've ever faced. Absolutely ruthless when necessary, but not needlessly cruel. He fights for ideals, a reformed empire built on merit rather than blood privilege, which makes him far more dangerous than a simple tyrant. And you think he'll ally with our empire?" Riekhan's tone was sharp. "I think he'll evaluate all options and choose whatever advances his goals," Yang said honestly. "Reinhard sees politics as chess. If your empire offers him resources, intelligence, or strategic advantage against us, he'll negotiate. He's pragmatic enough to work with anyone who serves his purposes." Leia exchanged glances with her companions. "Our empire is led by Emperor Palpatine. He's not known for sharing power. Any alliance would be complicated." "Which gives us a window," Yang said. "Reinhard will discover that quickly enough. He doesn't kneel to anyone. Eventually, he'll either need alternative allies or he'll decide to carve out his own territory. Both scenarios create opportunities for you to exploit," Skywalker said, not quite accusatory but probing. Yang met his gaze directly. "Commander, I'll be honest with you. I didn't choose this war. I'm a historian by training, a soldier by necessity. I've spent 20 years fighting to preserve democracy against an empire that believes autocracy is humanity's natural state. I've lost friends, mentored children who died in my battles, and made compromises that haunt me. So yes, I'll exploit opportunities if it means my people survive and return home. But I won't betray the principles I've fought for. Your rebellion fights for freedom and democracy. Those are words I understand. That's common ground." The silence stretched. Yang could see them processing, evaluating. Finally, Leia spoke. "You mentioned returning home. Do you believe that's possible?" "Unknown," Yang admitted. "The anomaly that brought us here defied every principle of physics we understand. Our scientists are analyzing data, but..." He shrugged. "We're flying blind, which means for the immediate future, we're residents of your galaxy whether we like it or not. That makes local politics relevant to our survival." Riecken crossed his arms. "What exactly are you proposing, Admiral?" "Information exchange to start," Yang said. "We need to understand this galaxy's power structures, key players, strategic resources. In return, I can offer tactical expertise and, if our interests align, limited military support. I won't throw 9,000 ships into a war I don't understand. But I can provide intelligence, training, strategic advice. Limited military support, Leia repeated carefully. Against the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Princess, I've been fighting impossible odds my entire career, Yang said with a slight smile. The Free Planets Alliance has been outnumbered, outgunned, and out-resourced for generations. We survive through superior strategy, tactical flexibility, and knowing when to fight and when to retreat. If your rebellion has lasted this long against overwhelming Imperial power, you understand the same principles. We speak the same language, strategically speaking. Skywalker suddenly spoke up. There's something else you should know. The Empire isn't just a military dictatorship. The Emperor and his enforcers, Darth Vader and others, they wield power beyond technology. We call it the Force. It's an energy field that connects all living things. Some people can manipulate it. Use it to see the future, move objects with their minds, even choke someone from across a room. Yang blinked, then blinked again. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? The Force, Leia confirmed, watching his reaction. It sounds impossible, but it's real. Vader alone has destroyed entire rebel cells through powers you'd consider supernatural. The Emperor is even more dangerous. That's the resource I mentioned earlier. The Jedi Order, ancient peacekeepers who wielded the Force for good, were wiped out during the Empire's rise. A few survive. They're helping us. Yang's mind reeled. Supernatural powers, precognition, telekinesis. Every tactical calculation he'd made since arriving suddenly required recalibration. How did you outthink an enemy who could see the future? How did you defend against someone who could kill without weapons? Admiral? Frederica touched his arm gently. Are you all right? I'm processing, Yang managed. He turned to Skywalker. This Force, can anyone use it? Only those born with sensitivity to it, Skywalker replied. It requires training, discipline. But yes, some people are naturally attuned. The Jedi spent millennia studying it. And your Empire uses this power to maintain control. Among other methods, Reinhard said grimly. Fear of Vader's abilities keeps systems in line more effectively than any Star Destroyer. Yang's strategic mind worked through implications. Reinhard wouldn't know about the Force. His first encounters with Force users would be educational, possibly fatal if he underestimated them. But Reinhard never underestimated enemies for long. He'd adapt, find countermeasures, exploit weaknesses. The question was whether Yang could do the same. This changes things, Yang said quietly. Significantly. I'll need detailed information on Force capabilities, known users, historical records. And I'll need to consider how this affects any potential cooperation between our forces. You're not running away? Leia seemed surprised. Yang laughed, short, bitter. Princess, if I ran from every impossible situation, I'd have resigned a decade ago. The universe just handed me another puzzle. I'll solve it or die trying. That's what I do. He extended his hand. So, General Riekin, do we have the beginning of an understanding? Information exchange, mutual interests explored carefully, no commitments beyond what serves both our peoples? Riekin studied Yang's face for a long moment, then clasped his hand. The beginning of an understanding. But Admiral, if you betray us or if this proves to be an elaborate Imperial trap, You'll discover that Rebel Alliance desperation breeds creativity. We've toppled AT-ATs with tow cables. We'll find a way to hurt you." "Noted," Yang said with genuine respect. "I'd expect nothing less." As they moved to a briefing room to begin the information exchange, Yang caught Skywalker watching him with an odd expression. Curiosity? Concern? The young commander seemed to be studying Yang as if trying to read something invisible. "Something on your mind, Commander?" Yang asked. Skywalker hesitated. "I can usually sense things about people. Intentions, emotions. With you, it's different. Like you're surrounded by possibilities instead of a clear path. I've never felt that before." Yang smiled. "Commander, I've built a career on keeping my options open and my enemies guessing. If your force senses uncertainty, that's probably accurate. I rarely know what I'm going to do until the moment demands it." "That's unusual," Skywalker said. "I prefer flexible," Yang replied. "Now, shall we discuss how exactly one uses the Force to choke people remotely? I need to understand what Reinhard will face when he inevitably makes an enemy of someone with these abilities. Because Reinhard would make enemies. It was inevitable. And when brilliant strategy met supernatural power, young Wen-li needed to ensure he understood which would triumph, or how to survive when neither could win cleanly. In the depths of the Imperial Palace on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine stood before a viewport that spanned the height of his throne room, gazing out at the city planets sprawling below. Behind him, the polished floor reflected the dim red lighting that he preferred. Shadows within shadows, secrecy made architectural. His gnarled hands rested on the railing, fingers occasionally twitching as if conducting an invisible orchestra. He had felt it 3 days ago. A disturbance in the Force unlike anything in his long, unnatural life. Not the familiar ripples of Jedi survivors desperately hiding their presence. Not the crude thrashing of his Inquisitors hunting through the Force like blunt instruments. This was different. A blank space, an absence where something massive should have registered. As if 20,000 ships had materialized in his galaxy without leaving a mark on the cosmic tapestry he'd spent decades weaving. "Lord Vader?" Palpatine said without turning. He had sensed his apprentice's approach long before the rhythmic breathing announced his presence. "My master." Vader's voice emerged through his respirator mask, mechanical and cold. He knelt, black cape pooling around him. "You summoned me." "Have you felt it?" Palpatine asked. "The disturbance in the unknown regions?" "I have sensed something, an absence, as if the Force cannot touch a region of space that clearly exists." "Precisely." Palpatine's yellow eyes narrowed. 3 days ago, 2 massive fleets appeared near the Anowat sector. Admiral Ozzel engaged one of them, arrogantly, as is his way. His Star Destroyer was disabled within minutes. The fleet that destroyed him possessed technology unlike anything in our databases. Their weapons fired with unprecedented precision. Their tactics suggested centuries of warfare experience. And yet, they do not register in the Force, Vader finished. "Not as living beings should," Palpatine corrected. "I sense thousands of human minds aboard those vessels. But they lack depth, as if they exist only partially in our reality. Or perhaps..." His lips curled into something approximating a smile. "They originate from somewhere the Force does not reach." Vader rose to his feet, tension evident in his posture. "Another dimension? A hypothesis. Ancient Sith texts speak of realities beyond our own. Dimensions where the Force flows differently or not at all. I dismissed such writings as metaphysical speculation. But if these fleets truly come from beyond our universe, they represent a threat." Vader stated. Or an opportunity. Palpatine turned from the viewport, his yellow eyes glowing in the dim light. A threat, certainly, if they ally with the rebellion. 20,000 warships would shift the balance of power dramatically. But consider, Lord Vader, warriors from a dimension without the Force, soldiers who cannot be predicted through precognition, commanders who cannot be influenced through the mind, fleets that exist in a strategic blind spot. Properly controlled, such forces could be invaluable. You intend to recruit them. I intend to understand them, Palpatine corrected. Intelligence reports indicate two distinct factions among these arrivals. One engaged our forces immediately, aggressive, efficient, led by a commander named Reinhard von Lohengramm. The other made contact with rebel elements, cautious, diplomatic, led by someone called Yang Wen-li. Two philosophies, two potential assets or enemies. He gestured, and a holographic display materialized between them. It showed fleet compositions, tactical analyses, intercepted transmissions. Von Lohengramm's forces claim allegiance to a Galactic Empire. Autocratic structure, merit-based hierarchy, emphasis on military supremacy. Their technology surpasses ours in several key areas: energy weapon efficiency, faster-than-light capability, fire control systems. Von Lohengramm himself destroyed Ozzel's Star Destroyer with minimal losses. A prodigy, the reports suggest. Young, brilliant, absolutely confident in his superiority. Arrogance is a weakness I can exploit, Vader said. Perhaps. But arrogance earned through genuine ability is harder to break than baseless pride. Von Lohengramm's record in his own dimension is impressive. Dozens of major victories, strategic innovations that revolutionized his people's warfare doctrine. He reminds me of you, Lord Vader. Before your injuries, raw talent combined with ruthless efficiency. Vader's breathing intensified momentarily. The comparison was calculated, as all of Palpatine's words were. A reminder of what Vader had lost, and a suggestion that this newcomer might be a replacement if Vader failed to prove his worth. And the other commander? Vader asked, his voice carefully neutral. Yang Wen-li. Palpatine's tone shifted, became thoughtful. Less aggressive, more subtle. His forces made no hostile moves despite encountering our patrols. Instead, he sought dialogue with rebel elements. Intelligence describes him as a defensive specialist, a commander who wins through superior positioning and enemy mistakes rather than direct confrontation. His record suggests he's never lost a battle when defending, but rarely pursues offensive operations. A coward hiding behind strategy, Vader dismissed. Or a pragmatist who understands that wars are won through attrition and morale rather than glorious charges, Palpatine countered. Do not underestimate him, my apprentice. Yang Wen-li has fought von Lohengramm to a stalemate for decades in their dimension. Two supreme commanders locked in eternal conflict, the aggressive genius versus the defensive master. That balance suggests equal competence through different methodologies. He waved his hand, and the hologram shifted to show star maps. Here is my concern. If Yang Wen-li provides the rebellion with his strategic expertise and fleet support, their effectiveness increases exponentially. Currently, the rebels survive through hit-and-run tactics and scattered cells. With 9,000 warships and a defensive genius coordinating their efforts, they become an existential threat. Meanwhile, if von Lohengramm decides our empire is an obstacle to his goals, and he will eventually, prideful men always do, we face a two-front war against opponents wielding technology we cannot predict through the Force. Then we should destroy them before they organize, Vader suggested. Crude. Wasteful. Palpatine's voice carried disappointment. Lord Vader, power comes not from destroying potential assets, but from turning them to your purpose. Von Lohengramm seeks order, hierarchy, meritocracy, all principles compatible with our empire. He can be negotiated with if approached correctly. Yang Wen-li fights for democracy and freedom, naive ideals, but ones that make him predictable. He will not commit to full alliance with the rebels without extensive deliberation. That indecision creates opportunities. What would you have me do, Master? Palpatine moved to his throne, settling into it like a spider in its web. I want you to make contact with Reinhard von Lohengramm personally, not as a conqueror, but as a fellow practitioner of power. Demonstrate the Force. Show him what true mastery looks like. His technology may be impressive, but can his neutron cannons stop telekinesis? Can his tactical genius counter precognition? Make him understand that his ships are meaningless against an opponent who can crush his bridge crew's windpipes with a thought. You want me to intimidate him into submission. I want you to establish hierarchy. Palpatine corrected. Von Lohengramm respects power and competence. If you demonstrate superiority, true, undeniable superiority, he will reassess his position. Not submission, but acknowledgement. He need not bow. He need only recognize that alliance serves his interests better than opposition. And young Wen-li? Leave him to his rebel friends for now. Let him gather intelligence, make tentative plans, commit to nothing. His caution is his weakness. While he deliberates, we will have already secured von Lohengramm's cooperation, or at minimum, his neutrality. And if young Wen-li does eventually commit to the rebellion, Palpatine's smile was terrible. Then we will have the pleasure of watching two supreme strategists tear each other apart while we consolidate control. Vader nodded slowly. I will depart for the unknown regions immediately. How shall I approach von Lohengramm? Directly. He despises political maneuvering and respects straightforward power. Board his flagship if possible. Demonstrate what the Force can do. And Lord Vader? Palpatine leaned forward. Do not kill him unless absolutely necessary. Brilliant commanders are rare. Brilliant commanders from beyond our reality are irreplaceable. I would prefer him as an asset rather than a corpse. As you wish, my master. As Vader departed, his cape sweeping behind him, Palpatine returned to the viewport. The Force swirled around him, dark and hungry. These newcomers represented chaos, an unpredictable variable in a galaxy he had spent decades bringing to heel. Chaos could be dangerous, but chaos also created opportunities for those bold enough to seize them. Von Lohengramm and young Wen-li, two legends from another dimension, now loose in his carefully constructed empire. One aggressive, one cautious, one seeking conquest, one seeking survival. Both unknowingly walking into a web spun by a spider far older and more patient than either could imagine. Palpatine's laughter echoed through the empty throne room. The Force had brought him a gift. 20,000 ships crewed by beings it could barely touch, led by minds it could not easily predict. Such pieces would fit beautifully into his grand design. He simply needed to move them to the correct positions on the board. And Emperor Palpatine had never lost a game of galactic chess. These newcomers would learn that soon enough. The Force was not the only path to ultimate power, but it remained the most reliable. And against opponents who had never faced it, who had no defense against it, who had no understanding of its true depths. Well, their education would be enlightening. For him, if not for them. Reinhard von Lohengramm stood in the Brunhild's war room, surrounded by holographic projections of the alien galaxy he now inhabited. 3 days of intensive intelligence gathering had yielded a picture both fascinating and deeply troubling. His senior admirals, Mittermeier, Reuenthal, and Oberstein, studied the data with expressions ranging from concern to calculated interest. "Summarize," Reinhard ordered. Oberstein stepped forward, his artificial eyes glowing faintly in the dim lighting. "The political situation is straightforward in structure, complex in execution. This galactic empire controls approximately 70% of inhabited systems through a combination of military occupation, economic dependence, and ideological indoctrination. The remaining 30% consists of rebel alliance cells, neutral systems, and criminal-controlled territories. The Empire's central authority flows from a single individual, Emperor Palpatine, who rules through fear and overwhelming force projection. One man controlling an entire galaxy," Mittermeier mused. "That requires either unprecedented administrative genius or extraordinary enforcement mechanisms." "Both, apparently," Reuenthal replied, gesturing to expand a tactical display. "Their military structure is elegant in its simplicity. Star destroyers serve as mobile occupation platforms. Each one carries sufficient firepower to pacify a planetary system. They've constructed a weapon called the Death Star, capable of destroying entire planets. It was destroyed by the rebellion 2 years ago, but reports indicate a second is under construction." Reinhard's eyes narrowed. "A weapon that destroys planets. The psychological impact alone would be devastating. No negotiation, no occupation. Simply obliteration for disobedience. Efficient, if morally reprehensible." "Indeed," Oberstein agreed. "However, the more concerning element is not their technology, but something our scientists cannot adequately explain. Multiple intelligence sources reference an energy field called the Force. Initial analysis dismissed this as religious superstition. Further investigation suggests it is real." Silence fell over the war room. Reinhard turned to face Oberstein fully. "Explain." "Intercepted transmissions describe individuals, Jedi and Sith, who manipulate this force to achieve effects our physics cannot account for. Telekinesis, precognition, mental manipulation, enhanced physical capabilities. The Emperor himself is reportedly a Force user of extraordinary power, as is his primary enforcer, Darth Vader. Our scientists have observed energy signatures consistent with these claims during analysis of captured Imperial vessels." "You're suggesting magic exists in this dimension," Reuenthal said flatly. "I'm suggesting a phenomenon exists which we do not understand and cannot replicate," Oberstein corrected. "Whether we label it magic, psionic ability, or undiscovered physics is irrelevant. The tactical implications remain. Enemies in this galaxy may possess capabilities that render conventional strategy inadequate." Reinhard walked to the viewport, hands clasped behind his back. His mind worked through scenarios, calculations, possibilities. A galaxy ruled by one man who could supposedly see the future. Enforcers who could kill with their minds. Rebels who had somehow survived against such overwhelming advantages. "The rebellion?" he said. "How have they persisted if the Empire possesses such power?" "Guerrilla tactics, distributed cells, hit-and-run operations," Mittermeier answered. "They avoid direct confrontation. Their major victory, the destruction of the Death Star, came from exploiting a design flaw, not military superiority. They're survivors, not conquerors." And Yang Wen-li has made contact with them, Reinhard stated. Intelligence confirms he met with rebel leadership 2 days ago, Oberstein said. The meeting lasted 6 hours. We don't know the details, but his fleet remains in rebel-controlled space. No formal alliance has been announced, but cooperation seems likely. Of course, Yang would align with the underdogs. The man had spent his career defending democracy against superior forces. These rebels were perfectly suited to his strategic philosophy: avoid confrontation, win through attrition, frustrate the enemy into mistakes. Reinhard felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Their war had followed them across dimensions, and Yang was already maneuvering. "Recommendations," Reinhard commanded. "We should negotiate with this Galactic Empire," Oberstein said immediately. "Ideological compatibility exists. Both our empire and theirs value order, hierarchy, and strong central authority. An alliance would provide us with local resources, intelligence, and strategic depth while we determine how to return home. If returning home is even possible," Reuenthal added grimly. "Our scientists have made no progress understanding the anomaly that brought us here. We may be permanent residents of this galaxy." Reinhard turned from the viewport. "I will not chain myself to this Emperor Palpatine simply because our governmental structures share superficial similarities. The reports describe a tyranny built on fear and superstition. My empire, the empire I'm building, operates on merit, justice, and rational governance. I won't compromise those principles for convenient alliance." "With respect, Your Excellency," Mittermeier said carefully, "we have 13,000 ships in hostile territory, with no supply lines, no reinforcements, and no support infrastructure. Pride is a luxury we may not be able to afford." "Pride has nothing to do with it," Reinhard snapped. "This is strategic reality. The moment we ally with Palpatine's empire, we become targets for every rebel in the galaxy. Yang Wen-li will have a clear moral high ground to rally support against us. More critically, we'll be dependent on an emperor who supposedly sees the future and manipulates minds. How long before we're his puppets rather than his allies?" Oberstein tilted his head. "A valid concern. However, remaining independent leaves us isolated. Yang Wen-li will leverage his rebel connections against us. We'll face a coordinated enemy while struggling to establish a foothold in unfamiliar space." "Then we don't remain independent," Reinhard said, a smile playing at his lips. "We forge our own alliances. This galaxy has neutral systems, criminal organizations, and disaffected Imperial officers. We find them. We offer them something neither the Empire nor the Rebellion can: competent military protection without ideological demands. We build a third power base." Reuenthal's eyebrow rose. "You intend to carve out territory in a galaxy you've inhabited for 3 days?" "I intend to survive and eventually return home," Reinhard replied. "And I won't do that by kneeling to an emperor I've never met or by waiting for Yang Wen-li to outmaneuver me politically. We act, we expand, we establish ourselves as a force that cannot be ignored or eliminated. And when Palpatine or Yang or anyone else wants to negotiate, they'll do so from a position of respect, not superiority." The proximity alarms shrieked. Every head turned to the tactical displays. A single ship had appeared on sensors, materialized as if from nowhere, less than 10 kilometers from the Brunhild. It was massive, wedge-shaped, but different from the star destroyers they'd encountered, darker, more angular. The energy signatures radiating from it were unlike anything they'd seen. "Impossible," Mittermeier breathed. "Nothing appeared on hyperspace sensors. How did they—" "Hail them," Reinhard ordered, his voice cutting through the confusion. And raise shields. Whatever that ship is, it's here to make a statement. The holographic display activated, revealing a figure that made Reinhard's tactical instincts scream warnings. The being stood over 2 meters tall, encased entirely in black armor that seemed to absorb light. A cape flowed behind him. His face was hidden behind a mask with dark lenses and a respirator that breathed with mechanical rhythm. The figure's presence radiated menace in a way that transcended visual intimidation. I am Darth Vader, Supreme Commander of the Imperial Fleet and right hand of Emperor Palpatine. The figure said, his voice emerging through the mask with synthesized coldness. You are Reinhard von Lohengramm. It wasn't a question. Reinhard met the masked gaze without flinching. I am, and you've entered weapons range of my flagship uninvited. Bold or foolish, Lord Vader? Neither. Necessary. Vader's hand rose slightly. You have made quite an impression in the short time since your arrival, disabling Captain Ozzel's Star Destroyer, establishing an unauthorized fleet presence in Imperial space. Your reputation from your dimension precedes you. A brilliant military mind, they say. A conqueror. A man who allows nothing to stand between himself and his goals. You've done your research, Reinhard said coolly. I'm flattered. Now state your purpose or leave. I have no interest in philosophical discussions with masked strangers. My purpose is simple. Vader stepped closer to his view screen, and Reinhard felt something shift in the air, a pressure that had no physical source, a sensation that made his tactical mind rebel against its impossibility. You operate under false assumptions, Admiral von Lohengramm. You believe your technology makes you powerful. You believe your strategic genius makes you superior. You believe nothing in this galaxy can threaten forces that conquered your own dimension. You intend to correct these beliefs? Reinhard's hand drifted toward his sidearm, a token gesture he knew, but instinct demanded response to threat. I intend to educate you. Vader raised his hand, palm open, fingers slightly curled. On the Brunhild's bridge, warning lights erupted. Structural integrity sensors detected impossible forces. Metal groaned. And then, before Reinhard's eyes, a section of the war room's bulkhead began to crumple, crushed by invisible pressure as if gripped by a giant's fist. The metal shrieked, folding inward, distorting. Officers scrambled back. Alarms wailed. Reinhard stared, his mind racing through explanations. Tractor beam? No, wrong energy signature. Gravitational weapon? The physics didn't match. Some form of advanced technology he didn't recognize. But no weapons discharge had been detected. Vader's ship hadn't fired. The only action had been that raised hand. This is the Force, Vader said calmly, lowering his hand. The pressure ceased. The damaged bulkhead remained twisted, a permanent scar. A power that exists beyond your comprehension. Technology cannot stop it. Strategy cannot predict it. In this galaxy, Admiral, there are forces your neutron cannons and tactical genius cannot overcome. I can crush your skull from across this transmission. I can board your vessel and slaughter your crew without drawing a weapon. Your ships, your fleet, your brilliance, all meaningless against power you cannot touch. Silence gripped the war room. Reinhard stared at the damaged metal, his mind processing what he'd witnessed. A force that worked without technology, without physics as he understood it. Vader hadn't been boasting. He demonstrated a fundamental truth. In this galaxy, the rules had changed. You've made your point, Reinhard said, forcing his voice to remain steady. What does your Emperor want? Acknowledgement, Vader replied. You need not bow. You need not swear fealty, but you will acknowledge that Emperor Palpatine's empire is the supreme power in this galaxy. You will avoid hostile action against Imperial assets, and in return, you will receive what you need most: time, resources, and neutrality while you determine your next moves. And if I refuse? Then I will return to this vessel, Vader said, his voice dropping to something approaching a growl. And I will demonstrate the full extent of what the Force can do to men who rely solely on technology and strategy. Your bridge crew will die choking on air they cannot breathe. Your admirals will find their hearts stopped by thoughts alone. Your shields will not protect you. Your weapons will not save you. You will learn, Admiral von Lohengramm, that in this galaxy, some powers cannot be conquered through conventional warfare. The transmission ended. Vader's ship vanished from sensors as mysteriously as it had appeared, simply gone, as if it had never existed. Reinhard stood motionless, staring at the twisted metal. Around him, his officers waited for orders, for reassurance, for the brilliant commander to unveil a counter-strategy. But for the first time in his life, Reinhard von Lohengramm had encountered a problem his genius could not immediately solve. Magic was real, and it was more dangerous than any weapon he'd ever faced. Young Wen-li had been aboard the Rebel Alliance medical frigate for 6 hours, listening to Princess Leia explain the intricacies of hyperspace navigation when the emergency transmission arrived. Julian burst into the briefing room, his face pale. "Admiral, we have a priority communication from the Hyperion. Commander Attenborough says it's urgent." Yang excused himself and followed Julian to a secured communication suite. The holographic display materialized, showing Attenborough's concerned face. "Alex, what's wrong?" "Sir, we've intercepted Imperial communications regarding Reinhard von Lohengramm's fleet," Attenborough said quickly. "Darth Vader personally visited his flagship 3 hours ago. Details are scarce, but Imperial channels are buzzing." Vader demonstrated what they're calling force superiority. Reinhard's command staff requested immediate consultations with our scientists regarding, and I quote, "non-technological combat capabilities." Yang felt his stomach drop. Vader confronted Reinhard directly, apparently walked onto his bridge without triggering any defenses, crushed part of his ship with telekinesis, and delivered what amounts to a territorial ultimatum. "Sir, Reinhard spooked. The Golden Brat doesn't spook easily." No, he didn't. Yang had faced Reinhard across battlefields for 2 decades. He'd seen him remain calm while outnumbered 5-1, maintain composure when assassination attempts nearly succeeded, and smile while entire fleets burned around him. If Vader had rattled Reinhard von Lohengramm, then the Force was even more dangerous than Yang had feared. "Has Reinhard made any moves toward alliance with the Empire?" Yang asked. "Negative. If anything, he's withdrawn. His fleet has relocated to the Kiak system, neutral territory, minimal Imperial presence. He's fortifying positions and deploying reconnaissance assets. Defensive posture, which is extremely uncharacteristic." Yang nodded slowly, his mind already working through implications. "Thank you, Alex. Keep monitoring. If Reinhard's strategic doctrine shifts, I need to know immediately." The transmission ended. Yang stood in silence, one hand rubbing his temples. Behind him, Julian waited patiently. "Sir?" the young man finally ventured. "What does this mean?" "It means the game just changed," Yang replied quietly. "Reinhard's encountered something he can't outthink. Something that renders his technological superiority and tactical genius partially obsolete. He's adapting, he always does. But for the first time, He's facing an opponent whose capabilities exist outside the strategic framework he's mastered. And us? We need to understand the Force better than Reinhard does, Yang said. Because if Vader could intimidate him, imagine what would happen if that power were turned against our fleet. They returned to the briefing room where Leia, Riekin, and Skywalker waited. Yang noticed something he'd missed earlier. Skywalker carried a cylindrical device at his belt. A lightsaber, if the intelligence briefings were accurate. The weapon of a Jedi. "Apologies for the interruption," Yang said, settling back into his seat. "But I need to accelerate our discussion about Force capabilities. Specifically, I need to understand its limitations." Leia and Riekin exchanged glances. Skywalker leaned forward, curiosity evident on his young face. "What happened?" Leia asked. "Darth Vader just demonstrated Force superiority to Reinhard von Lohengramm," Yang replied bluntly. "He crushed part of Reinhard's flagship with telekinesis and delivered what amounts to a threat. Submit or face consequences technology cannot prevent. Now, Reinhard is many things, but a coward isn't one of them. If he's retreating to defensive positions, it means he's encountered a problem he needs time to solve. Which tells me the Force is as dangerous as you've suggested." "More dangerous," Skywalker said quietly. "Vader's power is immense. I felt it. He's killed Jedi Masters, destroyed entire squadrons, conquered planets through fear alone. The Force flows through him like a dark river. Even other Force users struggle against him." "But he has limitations," Yang pressed. "Everything has limitations. No power is absolute. So what constrains the Force?" Riekin stood and activated a holographic display showing various tactical scenarios. "Range is a factor. Force abilities weaken with distance. Vader can choke someone across a room, but not across a star system. Concentration matters. Force users can be overwhelmed by multiple simultaneous threats. And they're still mortal. A well-placed blaster shot will kill them like anyone else. So, assassination is viable if you can bypass their precognition," Yang mused. "What about indirect attacks? Artillery strikes, orbital bombardment, unmanned weapons?" "Less effective than you'd think," Leia said. "Force users sense danger. They deflect projectiles, dodge explosions, sometimes even redirect energy blasts. It's not invulnerability, but it's close. The Emperor survived numerous assassination attempts through Force warning alone." Yang stood and began pacing, his thinking posture one his officers had learned to recognize over the years. "So, direct combat against Force users is disadvantageous. Their abilities provide overwhelming tactical advantages in personal combat and small unit engagements. But can they affect fleet-scale warfare? Can Vader telekinetically crush a capital ship's bridge from another vessel?" "Not typically," Skywalker answered. "The Force works best at personal scale. In fleet battles, Force users provide strategic advantages. Precognition for tactical decisions, enhanced reflexes for piloting, but they can't single-handedly destroy fleets. The Death Star was destroyed by rebel pilots, after all. The Force helped me make the shot, but conventional weapons did the damage." "Good." Yang stopped pacing. "Then the Force is a tactical modifier, not a strategic trump card. It makes individual engagements asymmetric, but doesn't fundamentally alter fleet-level warfare doctrine. That's workable." "You're already planning how to fight Force users," Leia observed. It wasn't quite an accusation, but close. "I'm planning how to survive them," Yang corrected. "Princess, Reinhard von Lohengramm and I have been locked in conflict for 2 decades. We know each other's strategic signatures better than anyone else alive. Right now, he's facing a threat he doesn't understand and cannot counter conventionally. That makes him dangerous. A cornered genius is unpredictable. He'll develop countermeasures. He'll find weaknesses. He'll adapt. And you need to adapt faster, Recon said, understanding dawning. Before he does. Precisely. Which brings me to a proposal. Yang turned to face Skywalker directly. Commander, you're a Force user, a Jedi according to the briefing materials. How would you feel about consulting with my tactical staff? Not to fight for us. I wouldn't ask that without formal alliance agreements. But to educate us. Explain Force capabilities, demonstrate limitations, help us understand what we're facing. Skywalker looked surprised. You want me to teach you about the Force? I want you to help me not die when someone like Vader decides my fleet is inconvenient. Yang replied honestly. Commander, I'm a historian and a strategist. I solve problems through knowledge and preparation. The Force is a variable I don't understand. That ignorance could get 9,000 people killed. I'm asking for education, not military service. Luke, Leia said softly, it's your decision. Skywalker studied Yang for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. All right, I'll help. But Admiral, I should warn you. The Force isn't just a weapon or a tool. It's a connection to all living things. It has a will of its own, in a sense. You can't approach it purely tactically. I'll try to keep an open mind, Yang promised. Though philosophy has never been my strong suit. Julianne here's better with that sort of thing. Over the next several hours, Skywalker provided a crash course in Force fundamentals. Yang listened, questioned, and filled 3 data pads with notes. Frederica and several of Yang's senior intelligence officers joined, absorbing information with professional intensity. Telekinesis required line of sight and concentration. Mind tricks worked on weak-willed individuals, but failed against strong personalities or those aware of the technique. Precognition provided glimpses of possible futures, not certainties. The future was always in motion, always subject to change based on choices made. Lightsabers were elegant weapons, but vulnerable to sustained blaster fire from multiple angles. Force lightning was devastating at close range, but dissipated over distance. What about Force users fighting each other? Yang asked. When Jedi fought Sith, how did those battles resolve? Skill, training, connection to the Force, Skywalker explained. The stronger Force user usually wins, but technique matters. Master Yoda taught me that size doesn't matter. A small being strong in the Force can defeat a physically larger opponent. It's about will, focus, and understanding. So, individual quality matters more than quantity, Yang mused. That's consistent with elite warrior traditions. Samurai, ancient Spartans, special forces in my dimension. Small numbers of highly trained individuals outperforming larger conventional forces. Exactly. One Jedi Master could hold off dozens of battle droids. Vader has killed entire rebel cells single-handedly. Yang nodded, pieces clicking together in his strategic mind. Then the counter-strategy is area denial. Don't engage Force users in conditions that favor their abilities. Use remote weapons, distributed fire from multiple vectors, environmental hazards they can't predict or deflect. Force them into situations where individual superiority doesn't overcome systemic disadvantage. You make it sound clinical, Skywalker said with a slight smile. Fighting Vader isn't a tactical puzzle, it's terrifying. Fear is a tactical disadvantage, Yang replied. I prefer to be prepared. Terror comes from the unknown. You're making the unknown knowable. That's valuable. Reinhard cleared his throat. Admiral Yang, assuming you develop effective counter-strategies against Force users, what's your long-term plan? You're clearly not rushing into alliance with us, despite the information exchange. Yang appreciated the directness. General, I need to be honest with you. My primary objective is returning my fleet home. 9,000 ships, hundreds of thousands of people. They have families, lives, homes in another dimension. I can't commit them to a war that isn't theirs without exhausting every option for return. That said, he paused, choosing words carefully. If return proves impossible, and if our interests genuinely align, formal alliance becomes viable. But I won't make that decision based on 3 days of acquaintance and shared enemies. A pragmatic answer, Leia said, if frustrating from our perspective. I imagine so. But I've learned not to make promises I can't keep. For now, what I can offer is this: intelligence sharing, tactical consultation, and a mutual defense understanding. If the Empire attacks your forces while my fleet is present, we'll intervene. If they attack us, I hope you do the same. No formal alliance, but operational cooperation based on shared interests. A halfway measure, Reinhard observed. A realistic measure, Yang countered. General, I don't know your rebellion well enough to bet 9,000 ships on your cause, but I know authoritarianism when I see it. I know what empires do to people who resist them. And I know that Reinhard von Lohengramm is going to make a move soon, either toward alliance with your empire, toward conquest of neutral systems, or toward direct conflict with my forces. When he does, having friends will matter more than having formal treaties. Leia stood and extended her hand. Then let's be friends, Admiral Yang, and hope that friendship evolves into something stronger when circumstances demand it. Yang shook her hand, noting the firm grip and steady gaze. This woman had survived the destruction of her homeworld, according to the briefings. She'd endured torture, loss, and years of desperate struggle. Yet she still fought with hope rather than vengeance driving her. That spoke to character. Friends, Yang agreed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to review Commander Skywalker's information and prepare briefings for my senior staff. Reinhard's defensive posture won't last long. He's planning something. And when Reinhard von Lohengramm plans, galaxies tremble. As Yang departed with his officers, Skywalker watched him go with a thoughtful expression. What do you sense from him? Leia asked quietly. Uncertainty, Skywalker replied, but not weakness. It's like he exists in a state of permanent adaptation. Every choice he makes opens 10 more possibilities. The Force shows me futures, but with him, the futures keep branching, splitting, multiplying. I've never sensed anyone like that. Is that dangerous? Skywalker smiled slightly. For his enemies, probably. For us? He shrugged. I think Yang Wen-li is exactly what he claims to be. A man trying to survive an impossible situation with as few casualties as possible. Whether that makes him ally or complication, I honestly don't know. In the distance, the Hyperion's engines flared to life. Young Wen-li was returning to his fleet, armed with knowledge about the Force and a clearer picture of the galaxy he'd stumbled into. Somewhere in neutral space, Reinhard von Lohengramm was fortifying positions and analyzing the same problem from a different angle. Two supreme strategists, one galaxy with space magic, and an empire that had just demonstrated it could threaten both with powers beyond technology. The board was set. Now the real game would begin. The kayak system had little to recommend it strategically. A dying orange star orbited by 3 barren planets and an asteroid field rich in heavy metals. No major hyperlane routes. Minimal Imperial presence. Perfect for Reinhard's purposes. Within 2 weeks of Vader's visit, he'd transformed the system into a fortress. Automated mining operations extracted resources from the asteroids. Shipyards assembled defensive platforms. His 13,000 vessels deployed in layered defensive formations that would make any assault prohibitively expensive. And every day, Reinhard studied reports about the Force with obsessive intensity. The phenomenon appears to operate on principles analogous to psionic ability, theorized in pre-spaceflight science fiction, Oberstein reported during the morning briefing. However, calling it magic or psionics is imprecise. Our scientists have detected energy signatures associated with Force usage, a field that interacts with biological neural patterns. Midi-chlorians, according to captured Imperial databases, serve as a vector for this interaction. Biological? Reinhard leaned forward. Then, it can be disrupted biologically. Theoretically. However, developing countermeasures requires understanding mechanisms we currently lack the equipment to properly study. We'd need live subjects who can use the Force, controlled experimental conditions, and time we may not have. Mittermeier entered the war room, his expression grim. Your Excellency, long-range reconnaissance reports young Wen-li's fleet has begun joint exercises with Rebel Alliance forces. They're conducting coordinated maneuvers in the Hutt space border regions, not combat operations, but clearly preparing for integrated warfare. He's building his alliance, Ruenthal observed. While we fortify and research, Yang networks with local powers. Classic defensive strategy, establish secure partnerships before committing to offensive action. Reinhard stood and walked to the tactical display, showing Yang's fleet positions. His old adversary was doing exactly what Reinhard would have done in his position. Leveraging relationships, gathering intelligence, avoiding premature commitment, while keeping options open. It was infuriating, because it was effective. What of the Empire? Reinhard asked. Has Palpatine responded to our defensive posture? Silence, Oberstein replied. No communications, no military action, no diplomatic overtures. Either they're content to let us remain neutral, or they're planning something we haven't detected. They're planning, Reinhard said with certainty. Vader demonstrated their power, expected submission, and received fortification instead. Palpatine didn't reach his position through patience with defiance. He's waiting for us to make a mistake or for circumstances to force our hand. Then we don't make mistakes, Mittermeier said loyally. Easier said than done when we don't understand the fundamental rules of engagement. Reinhard turned back to face his admirals. Gentlemen, we face a unique problem. Our conventional military superiority means nothing against an opponent who can crush Starship bridges with thoughts. Our strategic doctrine assumes rational actors operating within known physical laws. The Force violates those assumptions. We need a new approach. Assassination, Ruenthal suggested. Vader is powerful, but he's one individual. A sufficiently large coordinated strike might overwhelm even his abilities. Kill him, and the Empire loses its primary enforcer. And gains a martyr, Reinhard countered. Worse, it proves we fear him. No. If we move against Vader, it will be when we can guarantee victory and demonstrate our superiority, not through desperate measures that reveal weakness. the communications console interrupted them. "Your Excellency, incoming transmission. It's unexpected. Admiral Yang Wen-li is requesting direct communication with you." Silence fell over the war room. Yang calling directly? In 2 decades of warfare, they'd exchanged words during truces, prisoner exchanges, and twice after particularly brutal battles. But Yang initiating contact while they were technically not at war? "Put him through," Reinhard ordered, curiosity overriding suspicion. The holographic display materialized, and there was Yang, looking exactly as Reinhard remembered. Worn beret, rumpled uniform, tired eyes that somehow remained sharp despite suggesting perpetual exhaustion. Yang held his ever-present teacup, steam rising lazily. "Reinhard," Yang said with a slight nod, "you're looking well. Dimensional travel agrees with you." "Yang." Reinhard returned the nod. "I'd say I'm surprised to hear from you, but you've never been predictable. What do you want?" "To talk, off the record, as much as anything between us can be off the record." Yang sipped his tea. "You've been busy fortifying the Kiak system. Impressive work, really. Very thorough, but also very defensive for someone whose entire strategic philosophy centers on offensive action. Darth Vader must have made quite an impression. He demonstrated capabilities I haven't encountered before." Reinhard said carefully, "I'm adapting." "You're terrified." Yang replied bluntly, "Don't misunderstand, I'm not mocking you. I'd be terrified too if someone crushed part of my flagship with their mind. The Force is problematic for people like us. We built careers on understanding rules and exploiting them. The Force operates on rules we don't understand and can't easily exploit." "You've studied it then?" "Extensively. Spent the last 2 weeks consulting with a Jedi named Luke Skywalker. Nice young man, earnest. He explained Force capabilities, limitations, historical contexts. I've been compiling tactical analyses." Yang set down his teacup. "Which brings me to why I'm calling. I want to share information." Reinhard's eyes narrowed. "You want to help me understand the Force? Why?" "Because we're in the same boat, Reinhard. 2 fleets from another dimension, trapped in a galaxy we don't understand, surrounded by powers wielding abilities that render our conventional advantages questionable. You're fortifying because you don't know how to fight Force users. I'm studying them because I don't know how to defend against them. We're both playing catch-up, and frankly, neither of us can afford to fall too far behind. That doesn't explain why you'd help me." Yang smiled, that infuriating, tired smile that suggested he'd already considered 15 angles Reinhard hadn't. "Because, Reinhard, as much as we've fought over the years, we understand each other. We're both rational actors operating on strategic principles. We know each other's patterns, respect each other's competence, and, this is important, we both prefer victory through strategy rather than atrocity. I may disagree with your politics, but I've never seen you commit genocide or torture prisoners for pleasure. You're a warrior, not a monster. Flattering. Get to the point. The point is that this galaxy has actual monsters in it," Yang said, his tone growing serious. "Palpatine doesn't just rule through military superiority. He rules through terror. The Death Star wasn't a strategic weapon. It was a statement of willingness to commit planetary genocide. Darth Vader doesn't just defeat enemies. He makes examples of them. These aren't people you can negotiate with as equals. They're people who will use you until you're inconvenient, then discard you. You think I should ally with the rebellion. I think you should not ally with the Empire," Yang corrected. "Big difference. Reinhard, I know you want to carve out your own power base here. Build a third faction, play the two sides against each other, eventually dominate through superior strategy. It's what I'd expect from you. But that strategy assumes both sides will tolerate a neutral third party accumulating power. Will Palpatine tolerate that? Reinhard didn't answer immediately. It was a valid question. Palpatine had united an entire galaxy under his rule through a combination of political manipulation and military force. A powerful independent fleet appearing in his territory would be viewed as either an asset to be acquired or a threat to be eliminated. Neutrality required both sides accepting your neutrality. Would an autocrat who destroyed an entire order of force-using peacekeepers accept Reinhard's independence? So, you propose what? Reinhard finally asked. A truce between us? Cooperation against mutual threats? I propose we stop fighting each other while we figure out how to survive in this galaxy, Yang said. Our war belongs to another dimension. Here, we're both strangers trying to navigate a hostile environment. I won't pretend we're friends. We're not. But we're also not immediate enemies. Not while there are force users who can kill us with thoughts and empires that destroy planets for political messaging. The Free Planets Alliance and the Galactic Empire agreed to a truce once, Reinhard noted. It lasted 3 months before political pressure forced renewed conflict. True. But we're not in our galaxy anymore. There's no political pressure here, no constituencies demanding we fight. Just 2 fleets, 2 commanders, and a shared problem. Yang leaned forward. Look, I'll make this simple. I'll share everything I've learned about the Force, capabilities, limitations, countermeasures. In exchange, you share your intelligence on this galaxy's military technology and tactical doctrines. We maintain our separate positions, make our own alliances, pursue our own goals. But we don't shoot at each other unless one of us does something genuinely unforgivable. Define unforgivable. Genocide, enslavement, deliberate targeting of civilians, the usual atrocities. Reinhard, I know you. You won't commit those acts because they're strategically counterproductive and beneath your personal honor. I won't commit them because they violate everything I've fought for. So we should be fine. Reinhard studied Yang's face through the hologram. This was genuine. Yang Wen-li, the man who'd fought him for 2 decades, was proposing a truce not out of weakness, but out of pragmatic recognition that their circumstances had changed. And damn it, he was right. Fighting Yang while adapting to this galaxy's unique threats was wasteful. You're surprisingly trusting, Reinhard said. What if I take your intelligence and use it against you? Then you'll have proven yourself less honorable than I believed, and I'll adjust my strategy accordingly, Yang replied. But I don't think you will. You've always fought by rules, Reinhard. Your own rules, perhaps, but consistent ones. You don't break your word, neither do I. So if we agree to share information and avoid conflict, we'll both honor it until circumstances force otherwise. Oberstein stepped forward, his artificial eyes gleaming. Your Excellency, this could be a trap. Yang Wen-li is known for psychological manipulation. No manipulation, Yang said, apparently hearing Oberstein despite the comment being directed at Reinhard. Just mutual survival instinct. But I understand the hesitation. How about this? I'll send over my force analysis first. No strings attached. You review it, verify the information through your own sources, then decide if reciprocal intelligence exchange is worthwhile. If you decide I'm playing games, you've lost nothing and gained knowledge. If you decide I'm sincere, we both benefit. It was a reasonable offer. Too reasonable, which made Reinhard suspicious. but Yang had never been a liar. Deceptive through omission sometimes, brilliant at misdirection, but never an outright liar. If he said there were no strings attached, there probably weren't. "Very well," Reinhard said. "Send your analysis. I'll review it and respond within 3 days. But Yang, understand this. If you're attempting to lull me into false security while positioning your rebel allies for an attack, I will crush your fleet so thoroughly that even your legendary defensive genius won't save you." "Duly noted," Yang replied with that tired smile. "And Reinhard, if you decide to ally with Palpatine and help him exterminate the rebellion, I'll make your life so complicated you'll wish you'd stayed in your own dimension. We clear?" "Crystal. Good. Sending the data package now. It includes tactical analyses, Force user combat footage, suggested countermeasures, and historical records on Jedi-Sith conflicts. Everything I learned from Commander Skywalker, plus my own interpretations. Use it wisely." The transmission ended. Reinhard stood in silence, processing the conversation. His admirals waited for reaction. "Your Excellency?" Mittermeier finally ventured. "What are your orders?" "Download Yang's data package. Have intelligence verify every claim against captured Imperial databases. Have Science Division analyze the forced countermeasures for feasibility. And..." Reinhard paused, making a decision he knew would surprise his staff. "Prepare a reciprocal intelligence package. Military technology assessments, tactical doctrine analyses on Star Destroyers, everything we've learned about Imperial fleet compositions and command structures." "You're trusting him?" Ruenthal sounded skeptical. "I'm being pragmatic," Reinhard replied. "Yang's right. Our war belongs to another dimension. Here, we have more immediate concerns. If sharing intelligence helps both of us survive and eventually return home, then it's the logical choice. Besides," a slight smile played across his lips, "I'm curious to see what young Wen-li does when he's not constrained by Alliance politicians and supply shortages. This galaxy might discover why the miracle Yang is truly dangerous." The intelligence exchange proceeded with a cold, mechanical efficiency that would have shocked their former superiors. Data packets containing centuries of military doctrine, technological schematics, and tactical analyses flowed between the two fleets. On the bridge of the Brunhild, Reinhard pored over Yang's notes on the Force, his brow furrowed in concentration. The documents were exhaustive, filled with Yang's characteristic scrawled annotations in the margins. "He's identified a pattern," Reinhard murmured, more to himself than to Oberstein, who stood nearby. "Force precognition is not absolute foresight. It's a probabilistic sense of danger, strongest in the immediate moment and clouded by the user's emotional state. It can be overwhelmed by presenting too many simultaneous threats or obscured by actions with no clear hostile intent." "A fascinating hypothesis," Oberstein replied, his voice devoid of enthusiasm. "The data from the Imperial skirmish at Dara 4 appears to support it. The rebel cell there used randomized drone strikes, which a local inquisitor failed to predict, resulting in their escape. The lack of a single clear hostile intent from a living mind seems to act as a form of sensor jamming." Reinhard stood, the ghost of a strategy beginning to form. "It's a sensory tool, not an oracle. It can be fooled, saturated, or misdirected. Vader's demonstration was a targeted, singular act of intimidation. In the chaos of a fleet battle, his focus would be divided." He turned to his strategists. "I want our drone and fighter protocols rewritten. We will implement randomized multi-vector attack patterns. our capital ships will use staggered, overlapping firing solutions designed to present 100 potential threats at once, not one. While Reinhard planned for a new kind of war, Yang was dealing with the political repercussions of his unauthorized diplomacy. A hologram of General Reinhard flickered before him, the man's expression strained. "Admiral Yang, our intelligence confirms you've been in direct contact with Reinhard von Lohengramm. Would you care to explain why you are sharing classified rebel intelligence with the commander of an autocratic war fleet?" Yang took a slow sip of his tea, buying a moment. "General, the intelligence I shared was my own analysis, compiled from our joint sessions with Commander Skywalker. I deemed it a necessary risk. A Reinhard who understands the Force is less likely to be instantly crushed by Palpatine. A Reinhard who is not instantly crushed maintains a balance of power. That balance is what gives the rebellion and my fleet room to breathe." "You've strengthened a potential enemy," Riekin countered. "I've stabilized a chaotic situation," Yang corrected gently. "Before this, there were two likely outcomes. Reinhard is destroyed by the Empire, which then turns its full attention to us. Or Reinhard, in his ignorance, blunders into a full alliance with the Empire. Now, there is a third path, a three-way stalemate. In a stalemate, the underdogs, that's us, General, have the best chance to survive and grow." Before Riekin could reply, a priority alert flashed across all consoles. Julian Mintz, his voice tight, interrupted. "Admiral, General, long-range sensors are detecting a massive Imperial fleet mobilization. They're not heading for Kiax or our position. They're converging on the Corellian trade spine. Multiple Star Destroyer groups, including Vader's executor." Yang and Riekin exchanged a glance, the argument forgotten. This was the move they had feared. "They're not coming for either of us specifically," Yang realized, his mind racing over the star charts. "They're creating a kill box. They're positioning themselves to dominate the major hyperlane routes. They're not choosing a target. They're putting themselves in a position to strike at whichever of us moves first, or to intercept any attempt we make to link up." On the Brunhild, the same realization dawned. "It's a net," Ruenthal observed, pointing at the tactical display. "They're not committing to an assault. They're establishing strategic dominance. They're waiting for us to make a mistake." Reinhard's eyes gleamed. "No, they're trying to force our hand, to see if Yang and I will be driven together by their pressure or driven apart by our own paranoia. Palpatine is testing the strength of our fledgling truce." The next move came not from a fleet, but from a single ship. A neutral merchant freighter, its holds empty, drifted into the periphery of the kayak system. It broadcast a simple, unencoded message on a loop, addressed to Reinhard. It was from Grand Moff Tarkin's former protege, Governor Aris, a rising star in the Imperial military governance structure. "Admiral von Lohengramm," the message began, the woman on screen cool and composed. "Your presence in this galaxy is an undeniable fact. Your conflict with the rebel sympathizer Yang Wen-li is well documented. The Galactic Empire has no desire to see a destructive war fought in its territories. There is, however, an opportunity for mutual benefit. The Parmel system has declared for the rebellion. Eliminate this nuisance for us. In return, you will be granted official privateer status, access to Imperial resupply stations, and a recognized sphere of influence. Prove your value, and you may find the Empire a more accommodating partner than you assume." The offer hung in the air. It was a blatant, almost insulting attempt to make Reinhard into their attack dog, to force him to bloody his hands for their cause and shatter his truce with Yang in the most definitive way possible. "They want you to choose," Mittermeier said quietly. "Become their weapon. or become their enemy. It is a logical test of your intentions, Oberstein stated. Refusal marks you as an enemy. Acceptance makes you a useful subordinate. Reinhard said nothing. He was watching the strategic plot. The Imperial fleet's positioning was a masterpiece of intimidation. They weren't blocking his path to Parmel. They were inviting him to take it, while ensuring they could intervene if he tried anything else. It was a gilded cage, and the door was swinging open. At that moment, a second encrypted transmission arrived, this one from Yang. It contained only 3 words. He is watching. Reinhard understood. This wasn't just a test from the Imperial Navy. This was a test from the Emperor himself. Palpatine was observing how the 2 legendary admirals from beyond the Force would react to this pressure. Would they fall back into their old war? Would one submit? Or would they do something unpredictable? Reinhard made his decision. He would not be Palpatine's pawn. He would not be Yang's enemy. Not here, not now. He would redefine the game. Open a channel to Governor Aris, Reinhard commanded, his voice ringing with authority. When the woman's face appeared, he didn't wait for her to speak. Governor, I have received your generous offer. I will deal with the Parmel system, but I will do so on my terms, and my terms alone. You will withdraw your fleet from the Tayanab sector. Your presence there is an unnecessary complication to my operational planning. Once I verify your withdrawal, I will move. Do not contact me again with instructions. You sought my assistance. You will receive it as I see fit to give it. He cut the transmission. The bridge was silent. Your Excellency, Runthal said, a slow smile spreading across his face. You just gave an Imperial governor an ultimatum. I did, Reinhard replied, his gaze fixed on the starfield. Now we see how badly they want Parmel pacified. And we see how Yang reacts to me apparently taking the Empire's bait. He had not chosen the Empire. He had not chosen Yang. He had chosen a third path, audacious, arrogant, and entirely in character. He had taken the Emperor's test and was now administering one of his own. The next move was no longer Palpatine's. It belonged to the 2 admirals from another reality, one of whom had just thrown the game board into the air. A tense 48-hour standoff followed Reinhard's counteroffer. The Imperial fleet did not withdraw from Tayanab, but neither did it advance. It was a stalemate of wills, broadcast across the galaxy for any with the sensors to see. Then, the situation exploded. Young Wen-li, monitoring the deadlock from the Hyperion, received a frantic, encrypted burst transmission from the Parmel system. It wasn't from the rebel cell there. It was from a low-level Imperial logistics officer, one of Young's nascent intelligence assets. The Empire. They're not waiting. The man's voice was strained with panic. Governor Aris has ordered the 501st Legion to Parmel. They're not going to pacify the system. They're going to make an example of it. Orbital bombardment of the major population centers is authorized. The fleet is moving now. Young's blood ran cold. Parmel wasn't a major military target. It was a system that had symbolically declared for the rebellion, its defense force consisting of a handful of converted freighters and planetary turbo lasers. The Empire's response wasn't a military operation. It was a slaughter designed to force Reinhard's hand and demonstrate the price of defiance. He immediately opened a channel to the Brunhild. Reinhard's face appeared, his expression one of sharp impatience. Young, if this is about Parmel. Young cut him off, his voice uncharacteristically hard. The Empire is moving. They're not sending a pacification fleet. They're sending the 501st with orders for orbital bombardment. They're going to glass the major cities to prove a point to you. Reinhard's golden eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The cold calculus of it was breathtaking. Palpatine had called his bluff by raising the stakes to genocidal levels. If Reinhard did nothing, millions would die, and he would be complicit through inaction, shattering any moral high ground and demonstrating his powerlessness. If he intervened, he would be openly declaring war on the Galactic Empire. "This changes the equation," Reinhard said, his mind already racing through the implications. "It changes nothing," Yang countered. "This was always the equation. This is who they are. The question is, who are you?" He took a breath. "I'm going. My fleet will engage the 501st. I can't stop them alone, but I can buy time for evacuation. What you do is your choice." He cut the transmission. On the Brunhild, the silence was absolute. Every officer looked to Reinhard. "Orbital bombardment of civilian centers," Mittermeier said, disgust evident in his tone. "This is butchery, not warfare." "It is a test, as expected, but of a far more brutal nature," Oberstein noted, his artificial eyes gleaming. "Intervention aligns us with the rebellion in the eyes of the galaxy. It also places us in direct conflict with Vader. The strategic cost would be immense." Ruenthal looked at Reinhard. "He is going to get himself killed. Yang's fleet is not configured for a head-on fight against something like the 501st. It's a defensive force." Reinhard stood, his decision made with a swift, absolute certainty that had won him 1,000 battles. "Oberstein, you are correct. Intervention has immense strategic cost, but so does inaction. I did not tear down a corrupt Golden Bomb dynasty to kneel to a different set of tyrants who murder civilians to make a political point." He turned, his cape flaring. "All fleets, battle stations. We move to the Parmel system, maximum combat speed. Our objective is the destruction of the Imperial 501st Legion. All previous orders are rescinded. We are at war with the Galactic Empire." As the mighty Imperial Lohengramm fleet powered up its engines and surged into hyperspace, a new message flew through the void, this time from Reinhard to Yang, containing only 4 words. The truce is affirmed. The Battle of Parmel began as a tragedy. The 501st, led by the Star Destroyer Conquest, had already begun its bombardment when Yang's vanguard emerged from hyperspace. The Hyperion shuddered as it took glancing fire from Imperial ties, the rebel-modified shields holding, but just barely. On the view screen, the green marble of Parmel Prime was scarred with fiery wounds where plasma had scorched its surface. "Evacuation ships are still lifting from the capital," Frederica reported, her voice tight. "We're drawing their fire, but we can't hold this position for long." "We don't have to hold it," Yang said, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "We just have to survive for 10 more minutes. Reform the fleet into the Saffron Orchid formation. I want their attention divided, not concentrated." The Hyperion and her escorts weaved through the Imperial formation, a brilliant but ultimately futile dance. They were outgunned and outnumbered. A rebel frigate, the Liberty's Price, exploded under concentrated turbo-laser fire. Yang winced, his hand tightening on his command chair. Then space itself tore open. Not the subtle flicker of a ship arriving from hyperspace, but a violent, simultaneous rupture as 13,000 warships of the Lohengramm fleet translated into real space in a perfectly coordinated combat deployment. They did not emerge in a single block. They materialized in a complex, enveloping sphere around the 501st, their formation a work of art. Reinhard's voice, clear and commanding, echoed across the open fleet comms. "Imperial vessels of the 501st Legion, this is Reinhard von Lohengramm. You are engaged in acts of barbarism against a civilian population. Cease fire and withdraw immediately, or be destroyed. The response was a barrage of fire from the conquest. The battle was joined. It was a clash of doctrines. The Empire relied on overwhelming firepower and terror. Reinhard's fleet employed precision, speed, and tactical genius. Neutron beam cannons sliced through Star Destroyer shield generators with surgical accuracy. Swarms of Lohengramm fighters employing the new randomized attack patterns overwhelmed TIE squadrons, whose pilots were trained for straightforward engagements, not chaotic multi-vector assaults. From the bridge of the Executor, which had just arrived as reinforcements, Darth Vader watched the unfolding carnage. He felt it before he saw it. The sudden, violent deaths of thousands of Imperial crewmen, the shock and confusion rippling through the Force. But he also felt something else, something that made his respirator hitch. A blank spot. Two of them, the commanders of the enemy fleets. Their actions created ripples, but their intentions, their futures, were murky, obscured by a fog of pure, undiluted strategic calculation. "Lord Vader," a captain said, "the enemy fleets are coordinating perfectly. We're taking heavy losses. The conquest has been disabled." Vader stood, his black armor radiating menace. "Bring us into the heart of their formation. Target the enemy flagships." As the Executor plowed forward, its massive shields deflecting volley after volley, Reinhard observed its approach. So he comes himself, just as Yang predicted. He turned to his gunnery officer. "Implement countermeasure Theta. All vessels, pattern Gamma." The Lohengramm fleet shifted. Instead of concentrating fire on the Executor's bridge or engines, they began targeting its sensor arrays, communication masts, and point defense turrets. It was not an attempt to destroy the behemoth, but to blind and deafen it. Simultaneously, waves of drones, their actions pre-programmed and devoid of living pilots, swarmed the Superstar Destroyer. Their attacks random and unpredictable. On the Hyperion, Yang watched the strategy unfold with a historian's appreciation. He's using the Force's weakness against it. Vader can't predict an attack if there's no conscious mind to sense, and he can't focus his power if he's being annoyed from 100 different directions. It was working. The Executor's advance slowed as its systems were methodically dismantled. Vader, for all his power, was a warrior, not a fleet commander. He was being outmaneuvered by a superior strategist. Furious, Vader reached out through the Force, seeking the mind of his primary tormentor. He found Reinhard von Lohengramm, a blazing sun of willpower and intellect, but one shielded by a cool, rational detachment that made it difficult to grasp. Vader attempted to exert his will, to crush that brilliant mind, but it was like trying to clutch water. The pressure built in the Brunhild's war room, but Reinhard, prepared for this, simply activated a dozen different contingency plans at once, flooding his own command circuits with data and noise, further obscuring himself. Vader roared in frustration, a sound that echoed through the Force. He turned his attention to the other commander, Yang Wen-li. He found a different kind of mind, not a blazing sun, but a calm, deep ocean of possibilities, each branch splitting into a dozen more. To attack Yang was to try and strike a single drop of water in a stormy sea. The Imperial fleet, its command ship blinded and its commander frustrated, began to lose cohesion. Seeing the opening, Yang and Reinhard acted in unspoken concert. Yang's fleet, the Anvil, held the 5-1st in place. Reinhard's fleet, the Hammer, shattered them. The remaining Imperial ships, leaderless and outmaneuvered, broke and fled into hyperspace. The Executor, Its hull scarred and systems damaged, was the last to leave. Vader's silent fury a palpable wave that washed over the battlefield. The Battle of Parmel was over. The system was saved. On the Hyperion, Yang let out a long, slow breath. Julian handed him a fresh cup of tea, his hands shaking slightly. On the Brunhild, Reinhard allowed himself a small, triumphant smile. He had faced the Empire's ultimate weapon and won. He had faced his oldest enemy and fought beside him. A direct channel opened between the two flagships. The two admirals looked at each other across the light years of saved space and smoldering wreckage. "It would seem," Reinhard said, "our truce has its uses." "It would seem," Yang agreed, raising his teacup in a faint, weary salute. "But you do realize what we've just done, don't you?" "Of course," Reinhard replied, his smile turning sharp. "We've declared war on a galactic empire. Together." The game was over. The war had begun. And the silence that settled over the Parmel system was heavier than the battle's thunder. Wreckage drifted between the stars, the shattered hulls of TIE fighters and Lohengramm destroyers floating together in a grim, metallic nebula. On the planet below, the fires still burned, but the orbital bombardment had ceased. Millions had been saved. The cost was etched in the scarred hull of the Hyperion and the depleted ammunition counts of the Brunhild. The immediate aftermath was a study in contrasts. Reinhard's fleet began efficient, almost clinical recovery operations. Tractor beams retrieving escape pods, damage control teams patching hull breaches, formations regrouping with machine-like precision. Yang's forces, meanwhile, coordinated with the battered rebel cells on the surface, directing medical frigates and organizing relief efforts. Two empires, two methodologies, temporarily aligned. Aboard the Hyperion, the command staff awaited the inevitable. Yang sat in his chair, staring at the tactical display that now showed a galaxy fundamentally altered. Julian finally broke the silence. "Sir, we're receiving a new wave of transmissions from across the mid-rim. Systems that were on the fence, they're declaring for the Alliance. They're calling it the miracle at Parmel." "It's no miracle," Yang murmured, swirling the dregs of his tea. "It's a catastrophe waiting to happen. We just proved two unknown fleets can humiliate the Empire. Palpatine cannot let that stand. The reprisal will be biblical." As if summoned by his words, a priority transmission arrived, not from the Empire, but from the Rebel High Command. Mon Mothma's hologram appeared, her expression a mixture of awe and profound anxiety. "Admiral Yang, Admiral von Lohengramm," she began, acknowledging the open channel Reinhard had joined. "The galaxy has witnessed an act of incredible courage. You have my personal gratitude and that of every free being. But you have also lit a fuse. The Empire is already mobilizing. Every Star Destroyer from the core to the outer rim is being recalled. Intelligence suggests Palpatine is diverting resources from the second Death Star project to fund a new super fleet. You have made yourselves his primary target." Reinhard's image flickered beside hers. That was the inevitable result of refusing to kneel. The question is not what he will do, but what we will do next. Mon Mothma nodded gravely. "The Rebel Alliance formally requests a military alliance with both your fleets. Together, we can channel this momentum. We can build a force capable of facing the Empire." Yang and Reinhard exchanged a look across the light years, a silent, complex conversation between two men who understood each other better than any ally or enemy in this new galaxy. It was Reinhard who spoke first. "Your rebellion fights for restored democracy," he stated. "My empire is built on enlightened autocracy. Our goals are incompatible in the long term. A permanent alliance is a fiction." "Then what do you propose?" Mon Mothma asked, her composure unshaken. "We propose a pact," Yang answered, stepping in. "Not an alliance, a temporary goal-oriented compact. We will act as the spearhead of your rebellion. We will draw the Empire's main force, drawing their attention away from your cell-based operations. In return, you provide us with intelligence, local guides, and a secure base of operations. Our objective will not be the restoration of your republic, but the destruction of Emperor Palpatine and the core of his military power." "The decapitation strike," Reinhard clarified, his voice cold and clear. "While the rebellion harasses the body, we sever the head. Your enemy is the Imperial system. Ours now is the Emperor personally." The audacity of the plan left a silence on the rebel end. They were proposing to do what the rebellion had never dared, not to outlast the Empire, but to hunt its leader. "It is the only logical course," Reinhard continued. "Palpatine is the source of the Force-wielding power that makes the Empire so resilient. Remove him, and the structure becomes vulnerable. It is a strategic truth, regardless of one's political preferences." After a long moment, Mon Mothma agreed. "The compact is accepted. We will provide you with everything we have." The transmission ended. The deal was struck. The two fleets, now the most wanted entities in the galaxy, had a purpose. In the following days, a new kind of warfare was born. Dubbed the Lohengramm Yang Offensive by war correspondents who dared to broadcast, it was a blistering campaign that cut a swath through the Imperial core. Reinhard, with his genius for overwhelming offensive action, would identify and shatter key Imperial strongholds. Yang, the master of defense and maneuver, would then secure the territory, fending off counterattacks with intricate, devastatingly efficient strategies that left Imperial admirals baffled. They were an unstoppable combination. Reinhard was the unbreakable sword, Yang, the impenetrable shield. The Empire, accustomed to crushing rebels and intimidating worlds, had never faced two strategic geniuses operating in perfect, if temporary, harmony. They learned that neutron beam cannons could disable a Star Destroyer's systems faster than turbo lasers could penetrate their shields. They learned that a fleet could be in two places at once through misdirection and feints. They learned, to their horror, that willpower and tactical brilliance could, in fact, counter the vague premonitions of the Force. Back on Coruscant, the mood was dark. Emperor Palpatine sat on his throne, the air around him crackling with suppressed rage. The two blank spots in the Force were causing ripples that were destabilizing his entire domain. Reports of their victories were spreading, inspiring open dissent on worlds once cowed into submission. Darth Vader knelt before him. "Their coordination is flawless, Master. They think as one. The Force cannot easily touch them." "They do not think as one," Palpatine corrected, his voice a venomous whisper. "They think as two halves of a perfect whole. Von Lohengramm provides the ambition and the aggression. Yang Wen-li provides the caution and the depth. It is a partnership that should be impossible." He leaned forward, his yellow eyes burning. "Then we shall make it impossible. Every partnership has a breaking point. We must simply find theirs." The Galactic Civil War was no longer a conflict between a hidden rebellion and a galactic empire. It had been transformed. At its heart was now a compact, a temporary union between a democratic idealist and an autocratic prodigy. Two legends from beyond the stars who had, for a fleeting moment in history, aligned their wills to shatter an empire. They had saved a world, united a rebellion, and thrown the most powerful regime the galaxy had ever known into disarray. But as their fleets prepared for the next jump, heading toward the Imperial core and the inevitable, final confrontation with the Emperor himself, both men knew the truth. This was the end of the beginning. The war for the galaxy had truly started, and the peace that would follow, if they survived, would be a story for another day. Their compact would hold only as long as their common enemy existed. After that, the future was a branching path of infinite possibilities. The arrival of Reinhard von Lohengramm and young Wen-li irrevocably shattered the predetermined course of the Galactic Civil War. They introduced a variable the Force itself struggled to quantify: pure, undiluted strategic genius operating outside its mystical framework. Their temporary compact forged in the fire of Parmel created a third, unpredictable power that challenged both the Empire's tyranny and the Rebellion's idealism. They proved that Palpatine's dominance was not absolute, that fleets and will could counter dark side sorcery. In doing so, they gave the galaxy something it had lost: a genuine choice. Whether their legacy would be a new golden age, a different kind of empire, or simply the chaos of two colliding titans remained unknown. But they had, forever, changed the definition of what was possible in a galaxy far, far away, demonstrating that sometimes the most powerful force of all is a new idea, wielded by those brave enough to see beyond the horizon of their own reality.